Good morning, friends. Welcome to WordofGord 2023 OBEJournal number 8. And whether you've been following along or just starting, I'm sure this will be of great interest to you if you're interested in the projection of consciousness. I'm exploring that in this series, and particularly the spontaneous projection from the awakened position as opposed to the lucid dream of the sleeping position. First, a little something from Waldo Vieira's Projection of the Consciousness book. It's just a diary of out-of-body experiences. And Waldo's quite famous in the field, and turned out to be quite a, adept at out-of-body travel. This is early on, though. I had approximately 100% lucidity upon first leaving the body. That's pretty good. The body bobbed slightly until it became stabilized a few inches above the astral body. Bobbed slightly until it became stabilized a few inches above the body. The silver cord then immediately pulled it back. His guide, Teo Meo, began to work with energy throughout the body. A few minutes later, he advised me, roll to your right. Now there's an intimate guide. Obeying, I rolled the body to the right and made a perfect exit. Remaining close by, I felt the intense force of the energetic cord, as if I were testing it. This connection between the bodies has amazing vigor and power. The conscious takeoff triggers the energetic release of a fabulous power plant within ourselves. Rolling the psychosoma, as he calls it, appears to be child's play, but it is extremely effective. Returning to the body, I again received the suggestion to roll to the right. This time the psychosoma rolled to the right 3 times by itself, with surprising speed and momentum. It is interesting to note that the psychosoma spins freely and does not become tangled with the silver cord. I had previously experienced this unique property of the silver cord driving a spiral takeoff. The environment was brightly illuminated. Yes, it's often quite bright. I flew away profoundly happy. I began to feel a tranquil inner power and an indescribable sensation of non-physicality and lightness. I again experienced the euphoria of extra-physical life, which is incontestably superior to intraphysical existence. That's out and in. This experience leaves one with a feeling of being absolutely at peace with humanity and the entire universe. All of life's setbacks, pains, labors, emotions, aspirations, and efforts all but disappear in the light of multidimensional reality, experienced while in the extra-physical dimension, i.e. out of body. Any human attempt to express this experience is useless. It's not that useless, but it can be a challenge. I intentionally swim through the air using the invisible replica of the human body. This time, not being as dense as usual, I went from one place to another above the Atlantic Ocean. He did live in Brazil at the time, until I received the suggestion from Teo Meo to return to the soma. I re-entered the body in tenths of a second and remained perfectly lucid, even though I did not awaken. The sleeping soma gave me the impression of a locked box. I knew that I could very easily project myself from this state into space if I wished. In my particular case, I realized that it is much easier to effect successive takeoffs after the first lucid takeoff in a series of projections on the same day or night, especially if I don't move the body between projections. I've noticed that many posters on Facebook groups will say the same. Sometimes I find I can go several times in one night, in and out, in and out. The Serene Helper informed me that those operating at a high cosmoethic level are able to be productive and useful in many dimensions. Many dimensions. They can gradually attain the state of continuous lucidity, moving uninterruptedly back and forth between the intraphysical and extraphysical dimensions. The cosmoethic serves to build an interdimensional bridge that allows recall of events to pass from one dimension to the other virtually without effort. These individuals eventually live life in a state of continuous wakefulness. Certainly that's hinted at in the Alice Bailey channelings. When you get to that high level, you are aiming for continuous consciousness. And you will get there. I fully accept this as fact. The great illuminator evolutionary life initiate the interdimensional bridge in the extraphysical dimension in between intraphysical lives. You start this while you're dead. They dispense with sleep while in an extraphysical state, leaving the psychosoma at rest and operating exclusively through the mental soma, mental body, of course. I'm always rattling on about the value of the mental body because it doesn't have the distractions of the astral body. The consciousness does not need to sleep. The body, and in some cases, the mental body, need sleep. Dreaming is the greatest protest of the consciousness against sleep. The lucid projection represents the victory of consciousness over sleep and dreams. Another series of events. I became lucid next to an extraphysical consciousness with the appearance of a tall woman. Judging by her extraphysical features, she was about 6 feet tall and a yard wide. Oh, that's big. She nevertheless seemed very pleasant and was dressed in white. I felt that this helper had provided my extraphysical awakening through energy transmissions. She sent me on an extremely high-speed mental communication that we were going to an area of ravines. Within moments we were landing next to an enormous gorge in a ravine. The extraphysical consciousness remained in front of me. I could observe her from behind. When I focused on her hair, she reminded me of someone I had met in my childhood. The extraphysical consciousness was quite evolved and energetically vigorous. Pointing to the deep ravine, she asked me to examine the environment, bid me farewell, and disappeared suddenly. Yep, they take you somewhere and then they leave you there. I was in a place that appeared to be somewhere in the intraphysical dimension, i.e. physical. There was a localized storm a short distance before me in the ravine. Strange coloured blotches and nauseating smells bubbled up from the water resulting from the storm. I focused my extraphysical vision and was able to distinguish what was going on. As incredible as it might seem, two extraphysical out-of-body consciousnesses were fighting each other in a continuous battle. There were so many continuously changing deformations in their figures that they gave the impression of shapeless amoebas devouring each other. Inextinguishable, continuously inter-exploding firebombs. Living flames in a raging fire. Dragons gridlocked in a bloody fight, making unpleasant guttural sounds. Their combatants changed their stances and positions with lightning speed. The exotic, unstable life forms changed from one unpleasant colour to another. The beast's melancholy show inspired simultaneous repulsion and compassion in me. They were being watched by a group of whimsical, agitated consciousnesses. Questions arose in my mind. What should I do? How long would it last? At that moment I heard a resonating voice. A battle such as this is a sad epilogue in the conflict between these two consciousnesses. It will continue until the two opponents become exhausted, end up losing their humanoid forms and become enclosed in their own private world. I continued to watch the scene, musing that I had never thought, seen or read of anything like it. The voice then transmitted some thoughts. In the initial stages of the battle, when the opponents still have sufficient energy and their efforts are more spectacular, spectators frequently appear who become agitated by the morbid event as they hunger for strong emotions. That's a good one. Obsessing spirits, they hunger for strong emotions. Whether it be desire, lust, excitement, anger, hatred. This is what's happening here. The opponents, moved by the fire of hatred and manipulated by the power of imbalanced minds, will continue to gradually change until their forms regress. This constitutes a temporary suicide for these two, who are poisoned through a malfunctioning of their higher mental faculties. Have thoughts and sentiments of peace for all these demented beings and go on your way. I emitted thoughts and energies of peace and fraternity for all those gathered there and tried to understand the bizarre event. It was the biggest energetic confrontation that I ever witnessed outside of the body. All I could do was pity those concerned. I did not have any critical emotional reaction from watching said combat. This led me to observe what a difference compared to other occasions. If we ourselves change from projection to projection so much, what difference can we expect from projector to projector? Everyone has their own energetic capacity. Once outside the body, one will perceive extra-physical events in his own way, such that two projectors will never have identical experiences or results. No two projectors will have identical experiences or results. It's all personal. It's all creating that reality with your perceptions and trying to distinguish that reality from the consensus realities that you will be entering and moving through. The extra-physical dimension is a mental world. The mental universe of each one of us is unique and different from that of others. Now at the side of the ravine, I decided to follow the voice's suggestion. I flew up and away from the field, which I was able to see even from a distance. Now far from the ravine, I flew between the clouds through waves of energy, which acted like turbulence and impeded my flight. Nevertheless, I experienced an immense sense of well-being due to the freedom from the body. Nothing can be compared to flying in open space once in a while. True, thinking and acting away from the limitations of a dense body. I was in a perfect state of mind, happy, tranquil, and yet without euphoria. I can identify with that. Happy, tranquil, but without euphoria. It took a lot longer to return than it did to go. Within minutes, I was back at the apartment, passing through the bedroom window. The mental body re-entered the body. My lucidity was not affected by the waking process. I was not at all sleepy, but was more awake after the projection than I had been before. Well, that was inspiring, wasn't it? Waldo went on to found his own school, and it's very active today around the world. Many locations in many cities. You can go there and study. I think it had one name, now it has another. I'm not sure what name it has, but you can Google Waldo Vieira, and you'll get lots of info if you choose to do so. Where shall I go? Where shall we go? So, all very spontaneous. Mostly what I've done in the past 2 nights is spontaneous. Sometimes I have vague ideas that I might be going somewhere or seeing someone, but often, as with George Orwell, was half expected. RFK Jr. was a total surprise, as was Vladimir Putin. And suggesting I'm being guided by a slightly higher level of consciousness than the one that's talking to you right at this very minute. But then that can be true anytime. I find the astral Gordon is much more aware than physical Gordon, and always has been, as far as I can tell. And there's many examples of this in the earlier books. And it's just levels of consciousness, and each one's slightly more aware than the other, until you get right up to the higher self, and it seems to be aware of everything. And I've explored that in several books. More adventures in eternity, particularly in You Are History. Higher self seems to observe us and all its projections. That would be our other incarnations. And other incarnations from the higher self that are not, how shall we say, personally related. Higher self is like a hotel for many souls, and they hang their hats there as forms of consciousness rather than bodies and personalities, although they can manifest that if you wish to interact with them. And they've finished the journey, and they're not resting as such as an aspect of them is resting. We have many aspects, and more than just the physical body and the astral body. So, I find myself at the what I call the cottage in Focus 27, which when I was following the teachings in the books of Bruce Moen, he relayed his experiences at the Monroe Institute and the training courses he was on. And at one point early on, he was asked to find a place in Focus 27, which is a heaven realm beyond the belief systems of, religions and political stuff. And he formed a cabin or something, I can't quite remember, and operated from there. And I tried to do the same following along, and found that I had, or some aspect of me had created an astral plane home sometime before, and wasn't just then. I kind of rediscovered something that was there. It was in a forest, replica of a sort of almost typical thatched English cottage at the front, and an annex at the back that was long and rectangular, that was more in a fancy 18th century French style. And quite a clever little thing it was too. And in those books I described a fair bit of detail, which I'm not going to do now. We'll get to it another time. But it had multi-use purposes as well as a sort of personal residence for Astral Gordon. And one of the things that went on there were some musical performances, usually chamber music, chamber jazz, chamber classical, and other astral plane beings knew of this and would be informed, and would come for string quartets, piano quintets, trios, and jazz too sometimes. And I was like the organizer guy. I wasn't the player guy. I was a fan that liked to be the promoter. And believe me, there's plenty of musicians on the astral plane. There's the famous ones that I've mentioned a couple of times recently, and the people who played most of their adult lives here in this world and continue to do so there, with a greater sense of freedom and joy, because the whole financial infrastructure of performance and payment and location and movement of instruments and cost of transportation, that's all gone. Things are so much easier on the astral plane, and people have the same, if not greater, talents than they had before. And those who are lovers of musical forms have the same loves. So it's a no-brainer, really. And if you liked listening to Debussy here, you'll really enjoy it there. As does Debussy, who's still there, and other composers of his era. Satie's there for sure. Ravel's there. I think there's an aspect of Mozart there, although I'm not sure it's the one that incarnated before, because he's been there a long while. And the 20th century composers have, just kind of gotten settled and are enjoying the freedoms, like the ones I mentioned. I'm pretty sure Vaughan Williams is there for sure. And jazz guys are often there. Coltrane's there. Miles Davis is there too. Thelonious Monk. famous and the not so famous. If you've got a favorite local musician, whether he's guitarist or piano or whatever, and they were very good and you enjoyed seeing them locally, but they never became international stars as the ones I've mentioned, you can be sure they'll be there playing away and having a life. Just as all other creative people are doing creative things in any discipline. And hobbyists the same. People take lessons, If they were just getting into taking flute lessons in the last few years of their life, you can be sure they'll be at some music school taking more flute lessons. Same with all the folk style musicians, still exploring folk style music from their own particular cultures and spreading their wings internationally, learning music from other cultures, because one bliss leads to another, So I'm talking about the cottage, and Astral Gordon sort of runs the show there, and he's just walked up to me, looks, as he likes to do. He can morph his form just like anyone on the astral plane, and I'm standing looking at him, and he's looking at me, and it's like looking in a mirror. He thinks that's terribly funny, because I can sort of morph my form because I'm in the astral, but I tend to, for the benefit of, well, not for this, but for the benefit of clients that I'm doing work for, people that I'm helping out, I tend to look like the Gordon they recognize, because it facilitates what I'm trying to do. And but for others, when I'm zooming around doing this, that, and the other, I can take any form, and as can you if you choose to do so. I can recall from a Facebook group years ago, a woman who posted a few times under a tag, and I never knew the person's name, and she mentioned often wondering why it often seemed to be men having out-of-body experiences and appearing as men. And then she found out one reason why. She found herself manifesting in a Arabic or Middle Eastern culture, and she had a task to do that she knew all about, and was surprised but sort of knew about it, and was dressed as a man. And what she had to do, of course, initially she was shocked to see herself dressed as a man. She'd read about this and didn't really believe she could do it, but she did. So she was dressed in traditional dress, but as a man. And then she found out her task was such that she would be respected and obeyed as a man, whereas as a woman she would be challenged and maybe chastised. So when you're into male-dominated cultures, that's the best thing to do. And in my first book, or was it the first? Anyway, I found that when you're working, I think my guide showed me this, when you're working in Catholic countries, South America, for example, and you're working at disaster site, floods, fires, yada yada, tornadoes, best to appear as a priest, because Catholics, even they're a bit renegade Catholics and don't go to church anymore, they'll still obey a priest. Oh yeah. Rabbis the same. Did some work in Israel, and always helps to look like a rabbi there. Or if you're, the people running the sort of camps for refugees, and the astral plane camps for refugees, they often look like rabbis. Refugees are the recently dead, rather. So it's all about how you look and how you carry yourself. And you'll find it's easy enough to do once you get the hang of it. But many of you may still be floating around and enjoying just looking like yourself. Maybe a little slimmer and handsomer, perhaps. So the astral plane Gordon is still standing in front of me as I yap on here, and sort of grinning and enjoying my slight level of embarrassment as I stand in front of him, feeling like I'm looking in a mirror. And he says, well, Gordon, what would you like to do? And I said, well, I don't really have any particular desire, except here we are out of body, and let's continue to be so, and show what can be done, what can be experienced. So now we're walking through the annex at the back, which is, as I say, long and rectangular, like a small concert hall. I don't know how many would it hold, 100 maybe. French doors, windows that open out onto the garden, and that's another special place. And there's chairs and tables out there, as there are in the annex. It's for people to sit and enjoy the music and maybe have a refreshment while they sit there. Refreshments, of course, there you can manifest your own. Feel like a lemonade? Hold it in your hand. Feel like a beer? Hold that in your hand. The people that come are generally fairly well versed in the ways of the astral plane. They sometimes bring new friends that have just arrived, and they maybe are still learning the tricks of the trade, but mostly people manifest their own stuff. And it's a very friendly, loving affair. All music lovers, of course. And further on up, there's a low stage with, it's not particularly fancy, but it fulfills the purpose. The outside is more designed, beautifully styled. And it is inside too, but I don't want to get caught up in furniture. It serves the purpose. And there's no performance going on right now. Perhaps I should have arranged it so there was. Maybe we'll come back another time. It's kind of Astral Gordon does all this stuff. I don't do it. And there are distinguishing differences between us. He has his own life and seems to be not the Astral Gordon that's projecting from this body. He seems to be a more discrete entity. In fact, he's saying, yes, I am. Make no mistake. I am here. You are there. And he's just for fun, he's quoting a favorite song of ours by Soft Machine called Dedicated to You, But You Weren't Listening. And he said, that's a bit like what goes on here. It's dedicated to you, but you weren't listening. And yeah, I recognize the reference. Maybe you don't. It's just a little personal joke. And he said, well, perhaps we'll see you again sometime. I understand you're about to be off. And he's anticipating my desire before I actually have it. So, okay, off we go. Big concert hall. Big, elaborate, fancy concert hall. One of the astral plane cities. Oh yeah, it's the astral plane version of Toronto, which looks like Toronto, but is, nicer. No decay, no crumbling buildings, at least on that level. And, none of the reminders of physical plane poverty or, what's the other word I'm looking for? Busyness. Although it is a place full of people. Pretty fancy concert hall. And I'm inside, taking a seat. Many other people, they're just getting ready for something, getting settled. Who is it? Okay, it's, I believe, the orchestra's small version of the orchestra. It looks like they're doing something Baroque or classical, not the full 100-member, And it would appear to be, it looks very like the astral version of a Canadian performer that I've seen several times, Angela Hewitt. And she must have a very active life outside of the body that perhaps she doesn't know about, but then lots of us do. And not everyone, but some do. And they go out of body and they do what they do, and then they come back and they don't remember. I'm a writer. I've participated in various poetry readings and stuff on the astral plane, and I don't think about it during my physical day. I just know that it happened, and I recognize the reality of it. So, Angela Hewitt, sitting down, small orchestra, and it sounds like Mozart to me. Yeah, it's Mozart. But, it's something he composed after he passed, but it's very much in his style. You'd sort of go, oh yeah, that's Mozart. Let's see, let's listen a little bit more here. Some more adventurous chord patterns. I know there's some pieces that he composed here that have more adventurous and challenging harmonies and chord patterns. They're called fantasias. I often play them for people, 10-minute pieces, where he's more exploratory. And it seems like it's that kind of a style, a fantasia style, transposed into the concerto form. So not the sort of charming, easily to resolve patterns that you get in the middle period concertos, something more challenging. Kind of moving on to what an adventurous musician like we know, like Chick Corea would be playing if he was to do a concerto sort of vaguely in the Mozart style, which I think he's done a couple of times. And yeah, they're throwing in some bluesy, jazzy variations here, as as has been done by jazz players here on the physical plane. And yeah, it's very clever, and very smooth and very exploratory without being jarring or shocking. Just a very flowing variation of styles. And yeah, really nice. I'm no musicologist or academic, so I can't go into anything more detailed than that. But yes, very lovely. Now I know you can't hear this, but you can certainly imagine it. And if you're not particularly musical, well, give it a go anyway. You never know what your imagination will produce, and that imagination is more connected to what's going on in the astral plane than you suspect. Just give it free rein and let it go. And of course, there's the colors and textures that come off the sounds of the music on the astral plane. Look at the wafting of textures. I see light like lilacs and mossy greens. I see kind of gingery, dull orange, and little sparkly shafts of light at the melodic lead lines in the melody. It's quite lovely. Does everyone see this? I'm never quite sure. I mean, it's perception. You can see the colors coming. It's like the synesthesia experience that people have here on Earth, where they see a sound and they hear a color. I'm just seeing the sounds at the moment and enjoying that for what it is. And but you can tune it out. You don't have to see it. And again, that's another little astral trick. And I should mention that light shows here on Earth were developed from astral plane inspirations. Certainly the rock bands and their light shows were inspired from here. And earlier classical stuff where they tried to emulate that back in the turn of the 19th century. Scriabin had to go at it. Was also inspired by that. But there's lots of stuff that's inspired by astral plane experience that is brought down to this level by creative types of one kind or another. Production designers of film and theatre often are in the astral plane, picking up hints and ideas. And if you've ever watched the production designers on the DVD extras of adventurous movies, you'll see what lengths they go to get interesting effects. Interesting, challenging, magical effects. They're really into that stuff. So I'm moving away from that classical music performance in Astral Toronto concert hall, rather like as if Roy Thompson Hall wasn't pretty deluxe already. It's a combination of Roy Thompson Hall and the Opera House. And again, I'm not an architecture buff, so I'm not going to try and describe it. It's not. I'm just going to flop and not do it well. Only if I wish architecture buffs would do a body travel and talk about it. That's their specialty. Anyway, we're drawing to a close for now. I'll upload this and we'll get back to yakking away in a few minutes. And until then, so long.